The climax of the entire Lord of the Rings film trilogy is one of the greatest moments in fantasy cinema, showcasing a mix of loyal friendship, treachery and despair, and some good old-fashioned Hobbit endurance. And while the ending of this epic saga in the movie is beloved by fans around the world, not a lot of people realize that one of the most integral parts was changed, which is the ring's destruction. Not only that, but many of the details of Sam and Frodo's journey through Mordor to Mount Doom were rewritten and revised to fit the film narrative. So if you're curious about how this epic event really happened in the book, and how Peter Jackson altered Tolkien's original story for his films, then this video is perfect for you. And by the end of this video, we will have revealed the true reason why the ring was destroyed, which was by no work of Frodo or Sam, and might not be what you were expecting. My name is Gibby, and welcome back to episode 45 of Movies vs. Manuscripts Lord of the Rings edition. This is the show where each week I take a new set of scenes from the Lord of the Rings movies and compare them to the books to find all the differences along the way. Before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to this commenter from a past episode. Be sure to drop your thoughts down below to potentially be featured next. Also, a huge thank you to our Patreon members for making videos like this possible every month. Specifically, shout out to Jessica, Edale, and Robo Steve for being the first people to join the Patreon community before it was even officially announced. I would hike up Mount Doom with any of these legends. Per usual, I'll cover all the changes across the 4 major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But first, let's recap what happened during these scenes in the movie. That way, it's fresh on our mind for the analysis. We will be focusing on mainly Sam and Frodo's timeline, since last episode we looked at Aragorn and company at the Black Gate. So picking up from where we left off last time, we see Sam and Frodo sliding down some rocks in their orc gear and then hiding as a pack of orcs march by. Unfortunately, they still get caught by the captain, who thinks they are deserting battle, and he forces them into line. Then they march on, and we cut to later when the orc pack is converging with other groups, and the captain calls for an inspection. Frodo then collapses under the weight of the ring and catches the eye of the orc inspector. But before the orc can reach them, Sam and Frodo start a fight to cause a distraction, and as all the other orcs start fighting each other, the two hobbits crawl away unseen. We then see them walking across Mordor, and eventually Frodo falls down, telling Sam that the weight is too much. Sam then has the idea to get rid of all of their orc armor and lighten the load, and we see them throw away all their belongings. Sam and Frodo then hide in some rocks to rest, and Sam sees a star up in the sky, but Frodo is too occupied in his own mind to notice. The next cut shows us the two hobbits walking and then being spotted by the Great Eye, and Frodo falls over while Sam hides. Of course, there are other things happening here, like Aragorn arriving at the Black Gate, which draws the attention of the Eye away from them, and Frodo is able to get up and move on. We then see them crawling up a slope and once again falling to the ground, unable to move on. Sam makes his way to Frodo and holds him, and then we get one of the greatest moments ever as he puts Frodo on his back and begins to carry him up the mountain. But as they make it to the entrance of Mount Doom, Gollum attacks them, and Frodo barely escapes, running into the mountain. Sam then fends off Gollum and hurries after his master, who he finds inside holding the ring. Frodo then tries to throw the ring away but can't, and as he claims it, Sauron's eye quickly goes to Mount Doom and the Nazgul begin flying their direction. We also are seeing different moments of our other characters in battle, and Aragorn is about to be crushed by a troll. Then back at Mount Doom, Frodo is invisible and Gollum knocks out Sam, who wakes up a moment later to see Gollum fighting with an invisible force. Eventually, Gollum bites off Frodo's finger and takes the ring for himself. He celebrates, but as he does, Frodo gets up and goes back to Gollum to fight him for the ring. And in the commotion, they both tumble off the edge and Gollum falls down into the fires below. Frodo, however, is found by Sam, dangling on the ledge, and Sam helps him back up. They then both run out together and find a place to escape the lava flowing from the mountain. Sauron is destroyed, and we see back on the battlefield that the orcs are fleeing as the ground collapses under them, and the men of Gondor and Rohan are saved. Finally, after some talking, Sam and Frodo pass out on their rock, and we see Gandalf and some eagles fly in to save the two hobbits. And that is where we're ending things off for this week's episode. Before we jump into our plot changes, let's quickly cover our first 3 categories of characters, timeline, and location, which are pretty simple this week. For starters, our character category gets a pass. Then for timeline, we don't really have a change as much as some basic info that you wouldn't necessarily know if you only watched the movie. Technically, Sam and Frodo were walking through Mordor for multiple days, about 10 days total, I believe. This obviously isn't conveyed clearly in the movie because it would kind of be ridiculous to actually show all 10 days. I think for the most part, Peter Jackson and his team did a good job conveying their struggle through Mordor, but as we'll discover here in a minute, there are still a lot of important details that didn't make the cut. Lastly, for location, everything is pretty much the same, except for the fact that they excluded Sauron's Road. This was the path from Barad-dûr to the entrance of Mount Doom, and there is a time when Sam and Frodo take this road. Plus, Sam and Frodo take other roads as well. I would say about half their journey is on a road and half is in the rocky wilderness. Now, before we go jumping into the plot changes, I do want to clarify that I won't be addressing every little description or detail that Tolkien covers in the book. These 2 chapters, which discuss their journey in Mordor, are filled with Tolkien-esque descriptions of the land or their feelings or how their throats were so dry they could barely eat lembas. While all of these details are amazing for a reader, and technically the movie doesn't cover all of them accurately, we would be here for hours if I pointed out all of those changes. In this video, I am purely sticking with the key omitted moments or revisions that make a visible or significant impact to the plot, like the fact that the ring getting destroyed doesn't happen the way we see in the film. But if you're looking to relive this amazing journey for yourself and hear all of those Tolkien details, I'd highly recommend you check out the audiobooks on Audible. You can claim your first audiobook for free using my free trial link in the description, which helps to support the channel at the same time. But anyway, let's get into the plot changes. To start us off for this week, our first change is the omission of a massive amount of information about their journey before their run-in with the orc pack. In the movie, we simply see them slide down a slope and then the orc pack comes over, but there's a whole lot that happens in between their escape from the Tower of Cirith Ungol and then that moment, including a close run-in with 2 orcs who were sent out to hunt them down. So here's a brief rundown of what we miss. Starting with their escape, they drop off the bridge and fall into a thicket of thorns. Then, after climbing out, they go on walking for a while to get some distance between them and the tower. Eventually, Frodo gets weary and tells Sam that he can't manage the weight of the orc chainmail. Sam then has him take it off, and Frodo continues on without the mail, but still wearing his other orc gear. Something interesting is that Sam gives him his own Lothlorien cloak, which he had put away, but now Frodo used it to keep warm. Thankfully, because of its magical properties, the orcs they run into later didn't seem to notice its elvish make. After this quick change, they continue on but quickly halt again, as Frodo says he can sense a black rider above them. They then wait and see the light growing behind them and feel the wind changing. They hear the cry of the black rider delivering news to Sauron, but it isn't an evil cry. It's a cry of woe and dismay, which gives Sam and Frodo hope and courage. What they don't know is that this cry is the news of the Witch King's death. But regardless, they get back up after the rider passed and they walked on. Eventually, after walking for a while longer on the road, they came to some water, and Sam told Frodo that he would drink first. Frodo told him that there would be room enough for 2 to drink, but Sam informed him that he would rather try first to make sure it isn't poisoned. This is classic Sam, and although it's a small moment, I wish they would have included something like this in the movie. Sam is always there to lay down his own life for Frodo's, and this of course continues on until the very end. But for them, this is day 1 of a long journey. And we have our next change while we're still in these events before the orcs overtake them. Although a small one, it's worth noting that it is during this time that Sam saw a star up in the sky. After crossing the stream that they drank from and walking a bit further, they came to rest with Sam watching over Frodo. To keep himself awake, he got up and looked around and saw a star in the sky, and the comfort that the star gave him helped him go to sleep next to Frodo. Then they woke up and continued on. This next walk brought them to the plain of Gorgoroth, and they looked out at the armies before them, noticing that there were more than orcs there, as they saw many men camped out in the plain. This is our next small change, as the movie pretty much removed all evil men from this final battle. Although we see men earlier in the movies, and we see men even walk into Mordor earlier on, this last part of the movie only includes orcs in this dark land. But the book made it clear that men were there too. Anyway, at this point, Sam looks out and sees they're about 40 miles from Mount Doom, but they must continue on. After going 2 or 3 miles, we come to the next interesting omission from this early part of the journey, which is their close call with 2 orc hunters. After going back to the road, as trekking the high part of the ridge was too difficult, they suddenly heard orc voices and went to hide. They then saw 2 orcs come almost 20 paces from them and listened to them talk. During this discussion, Sam and Frodo learn that these orcs are hunting them specifically on orders from the tower to bring back the captive. We learn that they also had a run-in with a black sneak or a gobbler, who Sam later guesses is Gollum. The entire conversation ends off with the orcs fighting, as they were from separate breeds and different units, one being from the tower and the other a tracker. And after the scuffle, the tracker shot the other orc with an arrow and then hurried off. Sam and Frodo then stayed put in their hiding place for fear of other orcs being about. Then, as Sam told Frodo about the black sneak being Gollum, Frodo reminded him that he hasn't actually heard the full tale of what happened after he was poisoned by Shelob. So they sat there in the darkness and Sam recounted his entire tale. Then, after resting a while, they got back up and continued on. And eventually, after reaching a dead end, they had no other choice than to take one of the main roads that led down from an orc stronghold. This is a risky path, and what ultimately leads to them running into an orc company. But first, we have our final omitted moment from this early portion of their journey, and that is Sam's close call with Gollum. You see, after walking a bit more and then lying down to rest, Sam trusted to luck and went off to find water, as they wouldn't make it much further without it. So he left Frodo alone sleeping and went off. After finding water and coming back, he saw a dark figure flitting around near where Frodo was laying, and Sam stifled a cry and ran back to his master just in time for the figure to dart off into the darkness again. And this confirmed Sam's suspicion that Gollum was still on their tail. Eventually, they got back up and went out again, doing another 12 miles before halting. But it is at this rest that they began to hear the noise that they dreaded most on the road, which was the sound of an orc company approaching. Everything during this part of the movie is actually fairly accurate. The next real change we come to is when the orc companies converge and Sam and Frodo escape. In the book, they don't start a fight, or even get seen by an orc inspector. What really happens is that while the orcs are converging, there's a massive amount of jostling and pushing, as orcs normally do, with some blades being drawn as groups of heavily armed Uruks shove their way into the pack. And during this commotion and brief fighting, which Sam and Frodo didn't start, Sam suddenly had an idea to grab Frodo and drag him flat to the ground. Orcs tripped over them, but they were way too preoccupied, so Sam and Frodo were able to crawl around without being seen. Eventually, they crawled far enough and fell into a shallow pit and then just rested there. The next change comes after another day of travel, which, like I said earlier, I won't be diving into here because the movie does show moments of them walking around which are pretty equivalent to those traveling pages. The real change comes through a key moment in the book which the movie omitted, and that is Sam offering to take the ring. After getting up from a rest, Sam tries to get Frodo to begin again, and Frodo says that he can't as the weight is too much. Sam knows that offering to take the ring might cause more harm than good, but he offers anyway, and sure enough, Frodo freaks out, even brandishing his sword at Sam before coming back to his senses. Then it is after this that Sam says they might as well throw away anything they don't need. And just like what we see in the movie, they toss away their orc garb, the pots and pans, and everything but Sam's blade. Quick side note is that it's this moment in the book in which Frodo says he sees the Wheel of Fire with his waking eyes. Sam tears up as he's throwing away his cooking gear, and he asks Frodo if he remembers the stewed rabbit. Frodo says he doesn't remember anything and now feels naked in the dark. Once again, we can see how Peter Jackson and his writers did pull moments from the book, but just rearranged them to better fit the condensed film version, which I have no problem with. The next key omission is an internal debate that Sam has with himself. I know I don't typically dive into dialogue, but these thoughts in Sam's head are great to read, as they directly relate to some things that Sam says out loud later in the movie. In the book, we read about how Sam thinks of Jolly Cotton and Tom and Nibs and their sister Rosie. He thinks of water and the good times he had in the Shire. Then he sort of has an internal back and forth about the hopelessness of their journey. One voice tells him that it's worthless to continue and they should just curl up and die where they are, but his stronger voice comes out on top in the end as he thinks, I'll get there if I leave everything but my bones behind, and I'll carry Mr. Frodo up myself if it breaks my back and heart. And speaking of which, that brings us to the next change, which revolves around this iconic moment as Sam carries Frodo. How it happens in the book is a little different, as Sam actually carries Frodo twice. We read that they eventually came to the last stage of the journey, and Sam knew that the next day would be their final trek. But as they rested and got up again, Frodo would not budge, and Sam bent down and wept in his heart as he had no tears in his dehydrated eyes, and he picked up his companion and began the march up the slope of Mount Doom. Having no guidance except the plain will to climb, Sam eventually gave out and laid Frodo down. Frodo woke up and asked how far they had come, and Sam looked back to see that they had actually gone a lot farther than he had thought. Then, after looking upward toward the mountain, he saw a path plain as day a little ways above them. Little did Sam know that this is actually Sauron's road, the path that he uses to get to the mountain from his dark tower, but thankfully it was there as it helped them in their journey. But at this moment, Sam and Frodo were completely worn out, and they just laid there on the side of the mountain for a while. But suddenly the light grew and they felt a sense of urgency. Frodo told Sam he would crawl, and that they did. Crawling and crawling, they eventually made it to where the path was, and this is where we come to the second time Sam carries Frodo, and more importantly, a critical change was something we see in the movie. You see, as they came to the path, Frodo stood up, and as if controlled by another force, he turned to the east and saw the Dark Tower of Sauron. He then saw through some high-up window in the tower that there was a flickering red eye, which caused him to fall to the ground. Now, this sounds familiar to a scene we just passed by, right? Well, there's one crucial change here besides the fact that it's moved around in the timeline, which is that Sauron's eye never actually sees Frodo. Despite how it sounds in the book, Tolkien writes that the eye was not turned to them, but was gazing north. Frodo simply saw the eye looking the other way, and that was enough to make him collapse. On top of this, Frodo was trying to reach for the ring, and he told Sam to hold his hand so that he wouldn't use it. So Sam grabbed his hands, but quickly thinking that they had been spotted, which they hadn't, Sam figured he might as well put in his last effort. So he picked up Frodo once again and continued to carry him on the path. And now, after all this journey through the Dark Land, they have come to the final moments in which the ring is destroyed. But where is Gollum? Well, just like in the movie, Gollum jumps on them as they try to make it to the entrance of the mountain. But this is where we come to the first part of our defining change for this week. In the book, Frodo struggles with Gollum, but then gets free of him and stands up in a commanding form and said, "Down, you creeping thing, and out of my path. Your time is at an end. You cannot betray me or slay me now. Begone and trouble me no more. If you touch me ever again, you shall be cast yourself into the fire of doom." And then after Sam yelled at him to get going, Frodo went off and entered the mountain, leaving Sam to deal with Gollum. But before we get into the fires of Mount Doom, we must look at one last change with Gollum and Sam outside, and that is that Sam shows Gollum mercy. That's right, they don't fight. Sam goes up to Gollum to kill him, as he's always wanted to do, but Gollum just falls to the ground and starts crying in typical Gollum fashion. He wails about how now the precious will be destroyed, and he begs Sam to let him die after that. He says once the ring is gone, he will die, and Sam, having bore the ring himself now, seemed to understand some of the pain in the creature, and tells Gollum to be off, and then Sam hurries after Frodo. And now everyone, we are at the climax of the entire story, with Sam and Frodo inside the mountain. The first change is that when Frodo claims the ring, the enemies on the battlefield stop fighting. In the movie, we see Aragorn almost getting killed until the ring is destroyed, but in the book, we read that after Frodo claimed the ring, Sauron officially became aware of him for the first time and bent all his will on the mountain, which meant that the controlling power that was on the orcs and other foul beings was gone. They all stopped fighting and stood there in fear of what was to come as their driving force had gone away. But back to the mountain now, we have probably the most important change of all, which piggybacks off of the previous moment of Frodo commanding Gollum to back down, and that is that Frodo doesn't fall over the ledge with Gollum. Everything else we see happen in this scene is pretty much identical to the book, except for this one key thing. Gollum gets the ring, jumps with joy, and then trips and falls into the fires below. All by himself, no Frodo necessary. This is so incredibly important to the story. For starters, even as Frodo points out later in the book, Gollum played a purpose, just as Gandalf said he might. And on top of that, this moment just reinforces the nature of the ring and the mystic way in which Middle-earth works in the books. Frodo literally tells Gollum, "If you ever touch me again, you shall be cast yourself into the fire of doom." This is no accident or coincidence. These words are binding as Frodo uses the power of the ring to speak them. In the book, Gollum was the one to destroy the ring, and it was always going to be him. It was his destiny. It's weird to think that in an alternate telling of the story, Gollum is the main character, the one who starts it all and then ends it, as Frodo would have never destroyed the ring himself, and neither would have Sam if it were his burden. Now to wrap things up with the final changes here, we can go rapid fire. 1. Sam never lifts Frodo off the ledge. He actually carries Frodo out after he passed out from the fight with Gollum. Then after getting out, Frodo woke up and he and Sam went down the path until their way was blocked by the fires of Mount Doom. 2. Tolkien writes that the Easterlings and other evil men still fought on the battlefield, but the orcs all fled. The men were easily defeated and some surrendered, but still, it's a little different than what we see in the movie. Obviously, ending the fight abruptly in the film with all the villains retreating is a little better for visual storytelling, as it caps off the climax pretty well. Finally, at number 3, the movie removes Gandalf talking with Gwaihir, the Lord of the Eagles. Gandalf asks that he and some of his fastest kin take him to search the slopes of Mount Doom, and eventually, just like what we see in the movie, they find Frodo and Sam. And that is the end of all the changes for this week. Honestly, it's kind of hard to believe that we are here. Not to get sappy, but I started this series almost a year ago, and thanks to your support, I have made it this far. But as you know, even after today's episode, there's more to come with the Fields of Cormallen and the Scouring of the Shire and much more. For now, we can celebrate the fact that we've completed the quest itself, and the next few episodes are more so tying up the loose ends. If you want to get a head start and watch the next episode before everyone else, you can join the Patreon, where I typically upload every episode a week in advance for early access viewing. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and check out the series playlist to catch up on every episode you might have missed so far. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode.